I was thinking that can the government think of maybe increasing or even fully subsidized healthcare, especially for the older folks, because bearing in mind that we are also the citizens of Singapore, we help to build the economy when we are young, okay, when we are very economically active, and so when we are old, maybe we can have some...
I get you.
Thank you.
No, I get you. See, this is an issue which is going to loom in the years to come. We are going to have more old people, and when we have more old people, healthcare costs will go up tremendously. And the young people would, of course, also want to push the financial burden of looking after their own parents and grandparents to the government. Well, how do you resolve this problem? So you're going to start from the very beginning, where everybody will put aside a certain sum of money into your own MediSave, so that you have funds over there. But we know that MediSave alone is not enough. So you're going to buy insurance, so that collectively we pool our resources together, and then we have MediShield in case some traumatic events happen. We can have enough to pay for that episode. Well, if indeed we still can't afford that, then there's MediFund, which can help the cases where they just have no funds. But MediFund is very helpful to the very poor. To those who are not so poor, they have assets but not enough money to pay for huge medical costs. Then MediFund will say, no, you have assets, I can't help you very much. Well, what do we do then? His answer is more subsidy. We are very fearful at this stage to increase the percentage of subsidy because there's no end to it. So there's a certain proportion of subsidy which you would give to the people. I may not know the exact figures, but roughly, if you go to C class, you pay about 20%. Government pays 80%. You go to B class, you may pay about, say, 40% or 50%. Government pays the rest. If you go to A class, you pay everything. Government doesn't subsidize you at all because you want to choose the best. I assume you got the money to go to A class. You don't subsidize. Well, a time will come when even the 20% for individuals, not for the country as a whole, for certain families, where to pay the 20% may be a little tough. I would then say let's not lower the payment by the individual because you don't know what resources will be required in the future. But if there are individual cases, then you look to MediFund for help. Then it's more targeted. Instead of across the board, all old people beyond the age of 65 will not have to pay. I think that's a very risky policy. You do that, you cannot claw back. You cannot make people pay. And there will be more and more people over the age of 65 in time to come. So I'd rather do this in a targeted manner. Mm-hmm. If there are families, there are individual cases who can't even afford to pay the 20% subsidy for C class, MediFund must step in to help them. Social worker will do investigation, and then we help you on a case-by-case basis. But this is a key problem which the next generation of leaders and people got to resolve. So when I said is watershed election, I'm saying it's not just leaders and people who are better educated. The population is also aging, and that population is going to have very different demands from our time. The young man said so, and he's going to grow old. Yeah. So he's going to demand more healthcare for himself. Surely, you see. Surely. Then how do you solve the problems? Yeah. It's not wrong, Yeah. Question is how do you solve the problems for his desire?
One of the things I'm very interested is about productivity. You say we are going to improve our productivity to 2 to 3% a year. How are we going to do it? Can you please enlighten us about this?
Okay, first I think I would say is the carrot and stick approach. For example, the foreign worker levy will be increased, and the government has given notice to employers. It's not just a matter of curbing the numbers of foreign workers in Singapore. When you increase the levy, you're making it more expensive for them. Therefore, with fewer foreign workers, the employers got to think of ways of increasing the productivity. Otherwise, with fewer workers, you can cope in a higher levy. Well, what can they do to increase the productivity, not just for the foreign workers, but Singapore workers as well, whose wages will go up over time? You've got to look at the whole management system, the process itself. And there'll be ways and funds to help SMEs, even bigger companies, to see how they can improve their management processes, the management itself. Management must also increase its productivity and take the lead in this. So the processes would have to look into to see how we can do things better. Then there are times where they say the solution is quite simple. Just move into technology, into machines and so on. Well, an example will be today's word processor, your computers, and so on. So that improves the productivity. Instead of having people to type, all of us now do our own typing and do our own SMS or phones and so on, mobile phone. That increases the productivity. Instead of just a few fixed lines, everybody now is connected. So there are other ways where you can increase that productivity through machines technology. Third will be training of people. Multitask. All of us, if you're not trained, we can only do one thing at a time. A cleaners, for example, very low pay, just a broom, a pail of water, and just scrub and so on. But the newer generation of cleaners, and this applies more to foreign workers and to our own Singaporeans, because we should not be training our people to end up as cleaners. So for the foreign workers, they now multitask. They can, drive some maybe washing, scrubbing, polishing machines and so on. They cover more areas with machines, but they've got to be trained in how to handle all these machines and so on. So these are the various ways. Your concern will be, can we achieve 2 to 3% per year in productivity? I agree. It's a very high target. But the ministers in charge, they want to target 2 to 3%, but I think it's going to be quite a tough call to make.
Yeah.
2 to 3%. But you have to, otherwise you cannot increase your GDP growth by 3% per year without bringing in more labor. But we are determined not to bring in more and more foreign workers into Singapore. As a government, we will want people to work for as long as possible. 62, 65, 67, 70, and so on. Because the longer you work, the less dependent you are on others for your income. And you stay healthier, less problem for for your expenses and so on, or for the family and for everybody. The question is whether employers find it worthwhile to employ old people at a certain pay. So if our older people are prepared to adjust, your own energy has gone down, and your productivity is not quite the same as the younger ones, and you are prepared to work for much lower cost, competitively with younger workers who are paid much more, but whose productivity is higher, then that's the ideal solution. But this calls into account, the sentiments of the older ones. Because at what stage do you switch to a new pay, which is lower? And at what stage do you now report to a younger man? This is human factors. You cannot say, I work to 62, 65, then next day my income goes up by 30%, and I report to a younger one in his 40s and so on. I'd rather resign and not work. Well, that's the human nature. But ideally, you should stay in the same place. Make sure that the employers find it worthwhile to employ you, given the pay that you have at that point of time. If I may just explain this TFR, total fertility rate. It is low, but it is low not because married people are not having children. I should say 4, you're trying to have more than 1. It is low because a very high percentage of Singaporeans, men and women, remain unmarried. So TFR is for the whole population. If you are not married, in our society, you are not encouraged to have children.
Yeah.
Other societies, they may not mind, We are still very Asian, we frown upon that. So when you average it for the whole population, with about 30% of people remaining singles at the age of 35 to 40, then you have a very low total fertility rate.
Yeah.
So the question therefore should be, how do you get Singaporeans to marry? But this is a minefield because we're interfering in people's personal lives and so on. And we can encourage, say a few things, but they can't actually force. But many people want to marry, they will tell us. The question is, how do you find the right partners? That's the real problem.